and I learned so much about coronavirus. And one thing that's for certain, don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it. We have the best medical equipment. We have the best medicines, all developed recently. And you're going to beat it. Don't let it dominate. Don't let it take over your lives. Don't let that happen.
To argue against Donald Trump is to argue that we should let COVID dominate our lives and that we should be in fear of it. It seems Morocco has heeded the words of President Trump. In this North African country, life is very much back to pre-COVID days. So what, if anything, can President Trump and Morocco tell us about how to control COVID-19?
In the US, the big number that everyone is talking about is
220,000 Americans dead.
the number of deaths across the United States since COVID reached its shores. The underlying claim is that Joe Biden could have done better. But take a look in Europe, where lockdowns and curfews were the norm, and you see similar numbers. 235,000 deaths in a population larger than the United States, but in a part of the world where previous and current restrictions have made little to no difference to the current wave of the virus. In Europe's top 5 infected countries, with a collective population of a similar size to the United States, the number of cases was 42% higher than that in the US in mid-October. On October the 13th, the US had an average of just over 49,000 new cases per day. In Europe's top 5, the average daily case was at just over 70,000. Morocco came out of one of the toughest lockdowns in the world on June the 24th. Almost immediately, the COVID cases started to rise, very quickly. But since the end of lockdown, life has slowly returned to normal in Morocco. It's fair to say everyday life in Morocco is not affected by COVID-19. There is an obligation to wear a mask, but the enforcement of the law is as liberal as its interpretation. People pop it over their nose and mouth in enclosed spaces, but rarely when just walking down the street. There are police checkpoints on major roads. One of the purposes is to check whether people inside the vehicle are wearing masks. There is no social distancing between people. Cafes have a 1 meter social distancing policy, but 1 meter is something you hardly notice. To paraphrase Trump, Moroccans don't let COVID-19 dominate their lives. September was not a good month for Morocco, certainly in comparison to the UK. The North African country started the month by having more cases than the UK had. In September, Morocco had more COVID deaths than the UK. But Morocco's response was to change nothing. Absolutely nothing. In October, Moroccans are not dying in their thousands every day from COVID. They are not even dying in their hundreds every day. In August, Morocco had 802 deaths. In September, the country had 1,053, a 31% increase. In October, the death toll was 1,501, a 42% increase on September, but much, much lower than the death count in the UK. In fact, in October, Morocco has fared a lot better than the UK in all measurements. In October, Morocco had 28 days with fewer COVID deaths than the UK, compared with just 5 days of fewer deaths in the UK in September. In September, Morocco had 61,063 new cases. It ended the month with 18,744 active cases. This means 41,266, or 67.5% of the 61,063 recovered during September. In October, Morocco had 95,431 new cases, an increase of 56 from September. Morocco had 34,114 active cases on the last day of October, meaning 59,816, or 62% of the new cases recovered in October. On the last day of September, the total number of cases in Morocco was 123,653, an increase of 97% from August. At the end of October, the total number of COVID cases in Morocco was 219,384, an increase of just 77% from September, representing a fall in the rate of increase. The death rate remains at 1.7%, a percentage rate the country has held for months. COVID is still a problem in Morocco. The country had only 6 days in October when the number of recoveries was higher than the number of new cases. Numbers are rising when we would like them to fall, but the rise isn't out of control and the death rate remains constant. Morocco is here to tell the world that a country without lockdown is not a country heading for disaster. With just the bare minimum of restrictions, Morocco's COVID situation is far from overwhelming or out of control. In contrast, the United Kingdom. There are depressing times ahead for the UK. Cold, dark days bring the flu season, a time for coughs and sneezes. But this year is an added problem of a virus that seems to be out of control. The country is in chaos, stumbling from one set of unclear and illogical restrictions to another that have left the people confused, angry, and skeptical that the government knows what to do next. Starting with a nationwide rule of 6 that prohibited more than 6 people meeting at any one time meant that you could meet 5 people and then a short time later meet 5 other people, but you could not gather as a group of 11. Even though Sir Patrick Vallance, the UK Chief Scientific Officer, said this in March.
Mass gatherings is the one that keeps coming up, and mass gatherings, of course, are a place where you can potentially get infection from somebody. But the alternative is also important, that if you're not at a mass gathering, you're at a small gathering, and most of the transmission of these types of viruses occur in small gatherings, not in big gatherings.
The rule of 6 was followed by a 3-level system of restrictions, with an increasing number of areas coming under the strictest level 3, with hospitality, gyms, and non-essential businesses closing for an unspecified period of time. These restrictions targeted the north of the country, a region already in economic decline. They created greater resentment of the government. In Wales, supermarkets were forced to close some areas within their stores that sold clothing and other items regarded by the Welsh government as non-essential. This resulted in people pulling down supermarket barriers and plastic coverings. One man attempted to shop in just his underpants to prove the point that clothes are indeed essential. From midnight Thursday, November the 5th, the UK will follow other European countries and install a form of so-called lockdown. It's important to realise that the UK has never imposed a true lockdown. The version in early 2020 allowed people to exercise outdoors, travel throughout the country, and to work. Masks were not mandatory. The restrictions from November the 5th are even less imposing, amounting to little more than the closure of hospitality and requesting people to stay indoors in conditions where the virus thrives and leave their home only when necessary. It's a short-term action that buys the UK some time so it can enjoy Christmas, but the action itself solves nothing. Credibility and trust in the UK government has practically disappeared, with the population split between wanting further restrictions and a growing number of people questioning the value and science of these actions and doubtful of any underlying purpose to their implementation. October has seen a huge decline in the UK's COVID control. On October the 31st, the UK became the 9th country to pass 1 million cases.
It's important to realise that the United Kingdom doesn't publish its daily recovery rates. It never has. Therefore, it's impossible to have any idea of how many people in the United Kingdom actually have the virus on any given day. In Morocco, they publish their daily recoveries alongside all their other COVID statistics.
In September, the UK had 667 deaths, much fewer than Morocco. Despite the restrictions on movement, in October, that number of deaths in the UK reached 4,412, almost 4 times more than the number of deaths in Morocco. In September, the UK had acquired 128,832 new cases. In October, that number reached 546,536, a 324% increase compared to Morocco's 56% increase of new cases. On September the 30th, the UK had a total of 465,125 cases. On October the 31st, the total was 1,011,660, an increase of 117.5%. The percentage increase of total cases in Morocco from September to October was 77%.
It's easy to argue that Morocco has handled the COVID-19 crisis much better than its European neighbours. At the very beginning, the country imposed one of the strictest lockdowns in the world, much stricter than those in Europe. And that lockdown has certainly given the country an advantage. But since coming out of the lockdown in June, Morocco has imposed no new restrictions on its people. In fact, it's ended some of the restrictions on travel. In contrast, the United Kingdom has created confusion with a host of different implementations that doesn't seem to have helped the situation at all. Therefore, it's fair to conclude that simply imposing restrictions does nothing to help the situation and might actually make things worse. So maybe the answer is to simply not let COVID-19 dominate our lives.
Then, since when has closed been exempt? Since when has closed been unsafe? Rick, the fuck is off. It's fucking closed, mate, it's a disgrace. Coming into winter now, look at that. It's a fucking disgrace. All we need to do is go inside and take them off.
Can't do another, innit?
No, since when it's closed been non-essential? Since when it's closed? It's coming to winter, kids fucking...
Do you not think it's wrong? No, you're not taking my phone off me. Touch me, mate. Touch me, mate. Touch me, mate.